Hi everyone, if we haven't met before, I'm Georgina Gorman. Welcome to FeForte. Our mission at FeForte is to build female resilience using science and philosophy. And one of our key principles to help build resilience is to share knowledge. And today's conversation is one of the ways that we do that. We will be recording today's session. If you're on the line live with us and would like to ask questions, please do feel free to chat in as we go through. We'll also be holding a Q&A at the end of the session. We'd love for you to come off mute then and have a conversation with us. And we may stop the recording for that if you'd prefer. We hold these types of conversations really regularly, either as recorded sessions or as live events, and we cover many different topics. So you'll hear personal stories of challenge and resilience. You'll hear from women in particular roles or industries who can share their advice and wisdom. And you'll also hear from scientists and experts about the ways that we can build resilience and flourish. So make sure to sign up to our mailing list or follow us on social media to be the first to know about our upcoming events. Some of the other key principles we have to build resilience are to create community and to change habits. To create community, we've established a group where women can come together of all backgrounds and experiences to network, support and mentor each other. And finally, we build resilience through changing habits. And you'll learn key habits for resilience on any of our training programs. If you don't know about those, do feel free to check out our website to learn more or get in touch with either myself or Jackie and we can tell you about those. So without further delay, welcome to today's conversation with the wonderful Subha Barry. Actually, I'm going to hand over to Jackie now, who's going to introduce Subha for us.
Hi everybody, I'm Georgina's co-founder of FeForte, which was a lockdown baby. So I'm delighted to welcome Subha, who's I think I can now count as an old friend, but also as a mentor, because she was my boss when she was global head of D&I at Merrill Lynch, sitting on the main board, and I was running the team in EMEA. Prior to that, Subha was a banker herself, running teams and creating massive wealth for the bank and their clients, literally billions in assets and millions in revenue. Since then, she's gone on to be global head at Freddie Mac, an adjunct professor at Columbia University, a consultant in D&I, and most recently, CEO at Working Mother Media, which some of you on the call know, I believe. Even more recently, we've just learned she's recently created Seramount, which is the result of a merger of Working Mother Media, Diversity Best Practices, Culture at Work, and the Working Mother Research Institute. In addition to that, she's a mother, she's a dog lover, and we've caught up over the years about our dogs. I remember commiserating over the death of her beloved family member, Labrador. And she's also a wonderful celebration of womanhood and the empowerment of women. She's the real deal, and she has not pulled up the ladder. She's always trying to help other women to really reach their best in life, including me. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Subha to tell us about some big existential questions like who am I and what's important to her, where does she come from, and this perspective that she has as a woman of color making it in a man's world. Subha, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. It's, Jackie and I have stayed connected after both of us left Merrill Lynch. And the one thing that you realize from these relationships is, and it's not just for women, it is for both men and women who begin to look at their lives in a very blended way. You don't have sort of separate tranches for work friends and personal home friends. So those two things blend together. And in many ways, I find that the experiences that we each bring to bear really impacts the way we build these relationships. And Jackie's and my relationship is one such relationship that actually straddled the Atlantic. A little bit about my background so you can get a sense for where I came from. I grew up in a very conservative, South Indian family where girls essentially left their parents' home to go to their husband's home. So you essentially were, quote unquote, under the care of a man, whether that was your father or your husband. And lucky for me, I was raised with a lot of male cousins and with a certain amount of freedom around what I could and couldn't do in life. And what happened there was, growing up as quote unquote one of the boys in early childhood, and then when you hit puberty, asking to immediately become this feminine being was something that I just simply wasn't able to do. And what I did was I rebelled. I wanted all the things that the boys wanted. I was not allowed to go away to college, but I, pushed and pushed to be able to do the kinds of things they did. Um, as things evolved, one of the things I realized is that we learn the art of negotiating early in life. And if we can look back in our childhood, for those of us that really honed that skill actually came from childhood, wanting what you want and learning to negotiate with your parents to get it, whether it is maybe in this country it was about going on a sleepover somewhere, which quote unquote the first time your parents let you do it was almost impossible. In my case, it was things like going unchaperoned out shopping with friends, as an example. But those things actually really stand you in very good stead as you get older and you come into the workplace. But the way my story evolved was that I was lucky enough, with the help of some wonderful male cousins who had already come to the United States, who paid my application fee for my admission to universities here for an MBA without my parents' knowledge. It really allowed me to then get a scholarship and an admission to Rice University. And my parents were not able to say no at that point in time. They had nothing to hold me back with other than guilt and pressure, which didn't work. And so here I found myself in the United States in 1983, armed with a scholarship and a few $100s, and decided that I was going to conquer the world and be a CEO somewhere. And I didn't quite know what that meant, but I knew it was big, and that's what I wanted for myself. I was 20 years old. And what I didn't realize was that having grown up as a part of the majority population, I did not appreciate what being a minority would be like. So when I came to this country, and I came to Texas, of all the places, Houston, Texas, and when people sort of treated you differently, I couldn't quite understand why. And I think that was my first experience with quote unquote being the other. And I will tell you that I drew on my skills and strength as uh, as somebody that was rebellious, that stood up, that spoke out, that negotiated and asked for what I wanted. All of those skills really played a big role in helping me be able to navigate the world of being the other. And I remember, I always tell the story of how India didn't have television till I was 18. And in those early days, television programming was not very good. It was about government affairs and farming shows. So there was really, I did not know anything about pop culture in this country. I had never watched any of the popular TV shows here, or even heard of them. It was an immersion in the dorm common room, watching all kinds of shows. And I will be dating myself when I talk about, Star Trek and Archie Bunker and Cheers and Hill Street Blues and, the kinds of shows, the yesteryear shows. So I would have enough to enter conversations. The other thing I realized was that while I did not know much about sports, my growing up in India and learning how to memorize things was going to come in really handy, because I would open the newspaper every day, and yes, it was a physical newspaper, and I would memorize the box scores of every baseball team. And it was quite easy for me to do that. So I could enter conversations speaking fluently about baseball, a game which I had never been to, which I didn't know what it was, but I knew the box scores. And boy, they thought it was the cat's meow when they had this accented Indian girl with frizzy hair speaking about baseball. So it gives you a sense for how early on I figured out how to be part, how to insert myself in and become part of it. And we can say one shouldn't have to do that, but that's what I had to do to start to be accepted. Graduated, became a commodities trader, became a wealth advisor at Merrill Lynch, and I had a very successful career as such because I was one of the top 100 out of 16,000 advisors at Merrill. So it wasn't the money, it wasn't that success. In 1997, I faced my first of 6 bouts with cancer. And when I did that, it really sort of ground me to a halt because all of a sudden I realized that all my success, all the money I made would actually amount to nothing. I had 2 young children, and all I wanted to do was, look at my life and figure out what I had done that was truly meaningful other than make a lot of money. Not that I underrate that at all. It's important. Money is important, especially for women. Money is important. But it was to me telling that all I had not focused as much on legacy, on doing for others as much. I thought serving my clients was job enough. And that's what started me on my DEI journey, where I began to look at how few people that looked like me were actually part of my company. And I asked my manager why, and his response was, Subha, we got lucky with you. We're not pushing our luck again. And so what he did was he took everything I had done and put it into this nice little package that said, lucky, lucky, and that was not enough. And I thought, what are you missing out on? And that changed what I did after that. I built a multicultural business. I became global head of diversity at Merrill, and Jackie and I will have a conversation about that. And ultimately went on to really figure out how to teach the world around me that diversity wasn't just about a bunch of people who look different or talk differently. It was so funny, early days trading commodities, it was a very crass world. And they would insist, even though I didn't cook and eat Indian food every day, they would insist that I smelled like curry. And that was the constant call out about how I smelled. And I became so conscious of it. It was interesting. It was, but it's the equivalent of, have you ever been to a basketball game and see how they trash talk on the court? For those of you that have been aware of that, they say nasty things to each other. And part of it, you realize, is it's actually to get the other person off their game. It's to get them to feel uncomfortable so that they're not focusing on dribbling and shooting the ball. And so I realized, I didn't realize then, that their way of putting me down was really to actually get me off my game so they would be better in comparison. And I was really doing well. I was a phenomenal trader. And so that's what you need to learn to realize. That's the kind of thing that once you understand that will help you build resilience, because you realize that this is not something they're doing to you. They're doing something for themselves, and you are just collateral damage. And if you can take that attitude and approach towards whatever is directed at you, chances are that you will literally be like a duck letting the water roll off your back. And I believe that is one of the fundamental reasons for my success, because I don't let that penetrate my skin. And that was a lesson learned very early in life, where when people said you couldn't do something, you just don't let it actually seep in under your skin. You just let it roll off and say, I am who I am, and I know who I am. So I'm going to stop with that. And I would really love to ask Jackie, I know she had a number of things she wanted to talk to me about. And so I would love to begin that conversation.
Yeah, I've got some questions for you, but you've just brought up a big one for me in what you've just said, which is Did you find that this sort of fairly shocking "you smell like curry" comment, did that come from other women trying to put you down as well, or was that a
No,
male female thing?
it was purely male. I mean, commodities trading is a very male dominated
Yeah.
business. And as you know, Jackie, you and I have been in male dominated industries. Yeah, it's the guys. They don't think twice before doing something like that. If that's going to give them a little bit of a competitive edge or advantage, they're going to do it.
Okay. How did you manage the whole business of creating a family, having children, and being this sort of superstar banker?
Well, it was interesting because in India, in Indian families, if you have friends who are Indian, they will tell you that there is literally no boundaries that that you have between your life and that of your parents. So I got married. I met my husband Jim in business school. I married young. And literally, I think a month passed, and my mother wanted to know when we were going to plan a family. Don't delay it, don't put it off. So when are you starting? I mean, there was none of that. And it was not okay for me to say to her, Mom, mind your own beeswax. I mean, we'll get to it when we get to it. That it wasn't part of the culture. But in retrospect, I look at it and I think to myself, I got sick with my first bout with cancer when my son was not even 2. And I became sterile after my first set of treatments, so I couldn't have. And those were the days where they still hadn't thought through, oh, okay, let's freeze her eggs, let's do XYZ. They just they treated you with the chemotherapy, they blasted your body with it, and there I was, sterile after that. So I think to myself, maybe my mom pushing me and maybe my decision to have children early was actually a smart thing, because if I had waited long enough, I would have always adopted, but I wouldn't have been able to have my own children. And I will tell you, it was not easy. I didn't appreciate how important it was to build your support network and structure. Did not always have good nannies at that time. I had a lot of turnover with nannies, and that was really difficult. I had friends, but many of my friends were stay-at-home moms in my neighborhood and in my children's schools. So as such, I almost felt like it was an imposition for me to ask them to do something. I felt compelled to do my fair share. So if it was my turn to pick up the kids from Girl Guides, then I made sure that that day I was available to do it. It didn't matter what an important meeting I had or where I had to be. I turned up to pick up the girls and do whatever needed to be done. So I felt a lot of pressure to do my part, to not be seen as any less than the other moms. Full disclosure, I have been known to go buy cupcakes, bring them home, put them on a nice plate with a doily on it, and sprinkle some extra sprinkles on it and take it to school, pretending like it was mine, except when people peeled off the wrapper and found out it said Wegmans, that kind of gave it away. So I have been known to do that. And I look back and I think, I didn't have the confidence at that time to say to the moms, this is the best I could do. These are not home baked. These are not, I just didn't have the time. So hey, it is what it is, and we make do with what we can do. And I always wondered if my children felt shortchanged, and there is a lesson there. I was always in my family, I have always been the disciplinarian. I was always the one that minded the homework, that sort of called them out when they screwed up, etc. And and Jim is the kind who went to every game. He was always there. He was just this amazing, devoted, incredible father and husband. Because I would say to you that I always say, for professional women, one of the most important decisions you will make in your life is who you marry. Be really wise, choose wisely who you marry, because the right one will honor you, celebrate you, support you, and the one that isn't the right one will take you down every time and deplete you. But looking back, what I would say to you is, I wish I had been a little less the disciplinarian. I wish I had been one to let that bed be unmade. I wish I had been the one that didn't sort of call out every single thing. They didn't need to fix everything. And even if they did, I didn't need to be the one to do it. I wish I had really asked before I critiqued them as to when was the last time I actually celebrated them and said something positive. And I think if I had paused more to do that, I think the kids would have had even, it wasn't the fact that I was a working parent. It was the part that I was the critical parent that they remember. And so for those of you that are young and having children now, start to think about the fact that each time you're going to critique them, think about when was the last time I actually praised them, and try to get a balance there and remind yourself of it to be conscious.
So you said there it wasn't the working, but one of the things that I've experienced of working with senior women in business is they often have this working mother guilt, this sort of I can't be there for certain events, or I can't be home on time to make them tea or whatever it is. And whenever I leave early from work, I feel guilty there. There's like this pull in two directions. Have you not ever experienced that? Does that not come into you?
Oh, Jackie, I experienced it all the time, and I still experience it. But the reality is, I see my daughter, who's a surgeon now, make decisions, and I know that her the direction of her career, the choices she makes in her life have been shaped by my role modeling it. And so I'm not saying I got it all right, and I don't think she'll get it all right, but at least she has the courage of her convictions to try, to be bold, to speak up, to stand up when she thinks something is unfair or wrong. So I think, and I think the impact is even greater if you have a son. I have a son and a daughter, and with my son, it's very interesting. I look at how he treats women colleagues, women friends, his girlfriend, and I really believe that example that you set really does actually translate into impacting the lives of your children. And my nieces and nephews, who very often turn to me, those nieces and nephews whose moms have not worked, will often come and ask me for guidance and advice on things, and I do help them. So I do think that there is an important role to play.
Okay, and that actually comes to something Georgina and I have been talking about recently as well, about how do you bring up boys? How do you bring up girls and boys, in fact? And what's your view on that generally? Do you think you treated them differently, the same, or?
No, I treated them the same, but they are different children. That's the piece that I think that's where my daughter's pediatrician gave me the very best advice that I have ever received when she was born. And I would ask him a million questions on what to do and how to do it. He would say to me, "You do realize that she's never had another parent before. You're the first." She does not come in with a set of experiences around how this should be done. So she may be your first child, but you are her first mom. So, if she's uncomfortable, she'll let you know. Don't worry about it. Don't let that get to you. It was really interesting to think about it from that perspective. And I think I eased up a lot more after that. In bringing up daughters and sons, I think that you bring them up the same way with the same set of values and beliefs. But I think it's really where you notice transitions for them. So for example, for my daughter, when she was in 4th grade, I think, she decided she was really good at math. And so she comes, and her school classes were divided into different groups. You had the advanced group, you had the level group, and the ones that were lagging, which I actually happen to disagree with. I think a mixed group is a much better way to teach. But anyway, so she comes to me one day and says, Mom, I'm really struggling with math. I want to drop down to the on-level group. And I said to her, I'm surprised. You've always been good at math. What happened here? And her response was interesting. And she just said, well, I'm not doing as well on my tests. I'm not scoring all straight A's easily. Homework is taking me longer. And I just didn't buy it. So then I went in, went in digging, and I realized there were only 3 girls in the advanced math group. And the other 2 girls were, quote unquote, not the cool girls. And all of a sudden, this is the age at which girls want to start to be attractive to boys. It starts that early. And so she was already beginning the process of dumbing herself down.
Oh, wow.
And if I hadn't noticed and picked up on it, and I talked to her teacher and her advisor, and I decided to take the tactic, Jim and I both decided that we would essentially say to her, it's going to be okay if you only score B's. Even an occasional C is fine, but you're staying with the advanced group. And besides, genetically, you're incapable of not being good at math. Your father is undergrad statistics major. I was a math major in my undergrad, math and economics major. Your grandfather had a master's in math. Your other grandfather was an accountant. Your great grandfather had had also a master's in mathematics. So we are a mathematical family. Genetically, it's impossible that you didn't inherit some of those. So you're staying with it.
There's lots of great research about that, Subha, that women, we sort of live down to the stereotype that women are no good at maths. We talk about that on our program quite a bit. Georgina could probably go into it more, but it's certainly very common, and that desire to fit in and be cool rather than clever. It's quite common. If
I think
sorry,
about the number of girls who may actually do that and don't give themselves an opportunity to excel at science and math. So, something needs to be done in school systems to really start to look at the end of grade school to say, how do we continue to keep the pressure on to say to the girls, you can be just as good. Don't give up now.
Absolutely. Could you tell us if there was any sort of moments where you were actively bullied or harassed, and was that because, if there was that because you think you were a woman, or because you were a woman of color? Did that intersectionality affect how people treated you, or did you just not experience that at all in your career?
I faced plenty of that, and I would say sometimes it was because I was a woman, but often it was because I was different. And my accent now is very muted. You'd be hard pressed to actually say to me, you have an Indian English accent, but for a long time that accent was pronounced. And I looked the way I did. Before the age of flat irons, the frizzy hair was the norm. There was nothing much you could do about it. And so looking different, speaking differently, and the fact that they knew you were an immigrant. So there wasn't as much an anti-immigrant sentiment in the country. There was almost the ignorance around the unknown. So that was what, and it usually played out in humor, the crass humor that they would use. They would imitate the accent. There was a character called Apu in one of the cartoon shows on television that was this Indian 7-Eleven store owner, and they would imitate that when they spoke to me. Exaggerated imitation. And look, you could either take umbrage to it and challenge them on it, or you just let it roll off your back and move on and just let the numbers speak and the results speak. And that's what I chose to do. I would say to you that being left out, an example was as a wealth advisor at Merrill Lynch. If you were among the top 10 or 15 in your office, there were about 200 of us, that based on your production for the month in terms of what you put on the board as revenues you produced for the company, they used to get a box at Yankee Stadium, and they would get a bus and take all of you for the game. And senior leaders from Merrill's corporate leadership would pop in and sit and talk to you, etc. And because I was the only girl who ever qualified to go there, they would often say to me, Subha, we'll give you a Amex gift card to go to dinner with your husband. I think you'd prefer that much more than coming with us. And and when that didn't work, and I would say to them, I really do want to go to the game, they would say things like, oh, we may stop by a bar on the way back, and it would really not be appropriate for you, etc., etc. And it hurt then. It hurt because in that moment they were not including me, and that's like when you have a bunch of friends playing and they leave you out or don't pick you to be on the team, that hurts. But again, they were not thinking about me. And I always talk about this one man who ultimately stood up, and I didn't realize it, but it's Simsi said to that group, guys, like, do we have to stop at the bar on the way back? Why don't we just go to the game and come back? And why can't we include her? It took one of them, and that male ally made all the difference. And this is when you realize that you need a combination of a sense of justice and fairness that needs to be accompanied by courage. When those two things come together, you all immediately, what happened there was this man changed how others behaved, because there were many more people who probably felt like this was unfair, but didn't have the courage to speak up. But when he spoke up, another 4 or 5 or 6 of them stepped up to say, why not? Come on, guys. And Subha was included after that. So I always say, I learned early that there are many, many good men, and you need those men with that combination of sense of fairness and courage to come together, and then things change, and it changes from within. It isn't something that's mandated that HR says you have to do. It isn't a lawsuit. It comes out because of a culture within an organization where one person is willing to stand up and speak in a way that may not make them popular with their colleagues. There may even be a couple of people in that group that said, what's with you and Subha? What are you sticking up for her so much? What's going on? You'll have those kinds of insinuation, but this person had the courage to say, you know what? Doesn't seem fair. She needs to come. She qualifies month after month. Why shouldn't she come?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually systemic racism, isn't it? And male allies really do need to step up and work together with women to affect the culture. One thing you said resonated with me there, which is, you have a fairly thick skin, you just get on with it, essentially. And I think that's quite common for women who've been around in corporations for quite a long time. That was my strategy, and I've heard people on TV say the same thing. But I think things have changed over the last few years, in that the example that came up for me was a journalist saying, oh, well, I just got on with it. I'd make a joke and move on. And the person she was interviewing was probably half her age. And she was like, yeah, but it isn't acceptable that you have to modify you and accept this sort of covert racism, really, that or sexism against you, and we all have these stereotypes that are so strong that we can't even hear a voice unless it comes from someone who is similar to ourselves. So your description of the man speaking up and they could all hear the argument is so classic, isn't it? I mean, how do you feel about the generational difference between our sort of age group who just got on with it or laughed it off or just carry on, and sort of actually standing up in the moment, saying what you've just said is unacceptable. How do you feel about that now?
I have to tell you that, once I decided to sort of go on this journey of being that change agent, it started when I built the multicultural business unit at Merrill to really say to them, there's so much money in multicultural communities, we need to be doing business. Along with that, I also changed my whole approach. I became a teacher, and ad nauseum, I would really take every opportunity when this happened to not stay quiet, to not adapt, to not adjust. And so the thick skin is great, but I used that my podium to be able to continually teach people after that. So I would say to you, even if we are women who are in early career, learned how to develop that thick skin, when we have arrived at a place of power and position, I think it's incumbent on us to call this out. And you can do it in a nice way where not only do you call it out, but you then begin to engage your male allies that are part of it. You become better at identifying those male allies. You become better at being able to say to them, I'm going to speak out about it, and I could really use your support to reinforce it. So it becomes a 1-2. It isn't just you every time. And so that's one. I am enormously proud of this younger generation, which just really speaks up, speaks out, stands up for what they believe in, and are willing to accept the consequences of it. So what do? When they find that they are in a company and a culture that is not as inclusive, they stand up against it. And if the company is not willing to change, they vote with their feet. They leave. They go to another company that is more embracing. So I will tell you that they are showing in action with courage all of the things that are really important to create sustainable change. I used to say that ultimately, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it cannot just be a woman of color, a diverse individual be the one to champion it. You need the white men to stand up to champion it. I would similarly say, generationally, you need everybody, irrespective. It used to be like, you're young, what do you know? Or what experience do you have around it? The reality is they know right from wrong. They have a sense of fairness and justice. And to me, having that shine through is going to be one way in which you create change. Another example of that is, when did maternity, paternity leave policies become, parental leave policies in companies? That's when young men started to say, I want to take time off when my baby is born. I'm not just going to take 4 or 5 days off. I want 3 months. I want the same as my spouse does, because I want to be there. That created a change in the mindset in corporations, that all of a sudden don't have maternity, paternity leave, they have parental leave. So that's how change happens. And we are seeing it right now.
Yeah, I totally find that learning now comes from for me, from youth. I'm learning every single day and on a complete journey, because the perception of the world is different and better. And if we're going to save our planet, we need to have the strategies and the humanity to be willing to put our heads above the parapet in ways that we weren't able to or didn't feel brave enough to. Just as a final sort of roundup, because I'd love to get some questions from everybody who's on the call and Georgina, what are your basic coping mechanisms when you're feeling stressed? I mean, you've had some really hard life experiences like cancer, you've had the intersectionality experiences of bullying and all those early experiences that you described. What is it? What do you do? How do you calm down? How do you bounce back from adversity?
Well, part of what there are two ways to do it. For me, I've always felt and learned early that your breathing and your breath is something that you have. You don't need something from outside in to help you. So just being able to modulate your breathing is one way. And people call it a breathing meditation. I will say it's as simple as breathe into a count of, 4 or 5, hold for 2 or 3, and breathe out to a count of 4 or 5. If you do that, immediately it brings you to the moment and to the present. That's one. The second one is I have so much to be grateful for. And I note those down. And when in doubt, I pick up and look at, it's almost sort of, it's not a gratitude journal, but it's a list. It's almost a list of affirmation that I can repeat to myself, the generosity that I have received in my life. That gratitude brings me to a place where I feel good about me as opposed to feeling stressed. That's second. And the third one, and this is really a funny one, is I love to watch mindless home building TV shows. That is my go-to. And so love it or list it. There's a whole bunch of them that I could just sit and watch. And I feel like it probably comes from this great need to have order in my life. I have a touch of ADD, ADHD, and OCD. So I will fully admit to the fact that, I get out of bed, I need the bed made every day in the morning. The first thing I do, I need the towels folded away nicely after the shower, all of the things in order to get order in my life. So I also feel that watching these home building shows brings me to that calm and that sense of order. So those are my ways of coping, but the breath is definitely one, and it's immediate. I can do it anywhere at any time, and all you have to do is do 10 breathing cycles like that, and before you know it, you've kind of calmed down, and then you're able to look at the issue a little bit more objectively, as opposed to drowning in the pressure of what it's doing to you. And it doesn't mean I don't lose it every once in a while. I surely do, but I have ways in which to bring myself back.
Great. Okay. Gosh, I could talk to you for hours, Subha. But let's open it up to the floor. Georgina, did you want to manage this part?
Yeah, I'm just going to interject with everything we've had coming in the chat so far. So, Subha, lots of solidarity from Megan for the cakes, getting the cakes and sprinkles on. She said she does this now. Anne-Marie, when you were talking about being the strict parent who was always wanting everything tidy and beds made, etc. Anne-Marie said, I think pandemic has meant a messy house is the norm now. So I think we can all accept that that's the new state of play. Another question which you did touch on quite a lot, Sue, but after the question had come in, but just to go back to, when you mentioned people that were putting you down and saying those awful things, did you address that with them at the time? I know you said later around the male ally. Was there ever a point that you tried to address it with the person individually?
I have to admit to you that I would say to them things like, you got to find a better joke than that. But it was almost using humor to push back as opposed to really letting them see my pain. I didn't realize then, but I do now, that it was just ignorance. And I would have liked for a manager or somebody else to say, why would you say that? That's, come on, don't be nasty. If she smells like curry, you smell like fish. Because this person used to love going fishing. I mean, there were ways in which it could have been done, but I didn't. I usually just pushed back with humor. And it didn't feel satisfying enough. I never walked away feeling like, I would have liked to have punched them out after a few times, but I never did. And it is what it is. And I was not a wallflower by any stretch of the imagination. I was not a wallflower, but I felt like that was not the battle that I could fight to win, that I knew I would get too emotional and I didn't want to go there.
Interesting. Yeah, fair enough. And is there anything that would you do anything differently now with
well, I'll give you an example. I encourage people when they come. I mentor a lot of women specifically women of color. And in doing that, I always say to them, think through the issue. You may not have the answer the first time, but you've got to be prepared for an answer the second time. And I usually tell them, think about what it is you're going to say, rehearse it, use someone as a sounding board to rehearse it, and then make sure that the next time it happens that you do deliver that message to say, I know you mean for this to be funny, but I have to tell you that it hurts me. When you say that, you hurt me. And I know you're not the kind of person that wants to hurt me. So it isn't funny to me and it is hurtful to me. So would you please not do that again? What is someone going to say when you say that? So I would say to you, you need to have a response. You need to actually, frame it and be able to deliver it in a way that they are able to actually hear it. And if you do it a couple of times and they still don't hear it, then guess what? That's not someone you're going to change. But I will say to you, 9 times out of 10, people will actually say to themselves, oops, I never realized I did that. I thought it was funny. I got a bunch of laughs from everybody around. And you can add in that, say, guys, if you didn't laugh at his jokes, he wouldn't think it was funny. He wouldn't do it again. So call them out on it also.
That's really interesting. So it's, what I'm hearing there, so particularly, is to focus on how to share with them how it makes you feel, that it does, to be a bit vulnerable and say it is hurting you, because you could so easily go down the route of, that's not appropriate, not right, go more down the values route. But I think what's powerful about that statement is, it hurts me when you do that. I'm sure you don't mean to. You're a nice person. Why would you do that? Therefore, please don't do it again, and hope that works.
Well, when you personalize it, that is your truth.
Yeah.
No one can argue your truth. You can argue the facts about, I feel this way versus you feel this way. But if this is my truth and I'm expressing it to you, all I'm asking is for you to show consideration to my truth.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's really powerful. Another question that's come in from Katie: as leaders, having a personal board of directors is so important in our growth. Question for you: who is on your board, and are your accountability partners in your growth? And how do you select them? Sorry, that's my bad reading.
I do. Throughout my life, I've had this kind of, I've never called them my board of directors, but they have always been there. In my youth, it was a lot of my male cousins, because I wanted to learn from them. I felt like they had figured out how to be able to get to what they wanted. And so essentially your board is maybe a group of people who you admire for qualities that they possess, that are able to get them, on their journey in a way that you would wish for yourself. Okay. Then coming to school and college, it was very often, interestingly enough, not somebody that was always sort of senior to you. I found that some of my peers, some of my friends had qualities that I really admired, and I would situationally seek their guidance for that. Fast forward coming into the workplace, it was a combination. And I think the best example I can give was one of my early mentors was an executive assistant who once said to me very early in career, she said, I'm really good at what I do. You got to learn to trust me. When you do your work and you try to do my work, you're not letting me do what I have to do, and you're not very good at doing what I do. So, trust me with this. And it actually happened because, I would make appointments, and then I would have given her instructions to make the appointments and then make them myself. And she would say to me, why do you bother? Why do you give them to me? Either do it yourself or give it to me. And if you think the best use of your time is in scheduling your appointments, then be my guest. but I have a gut feeling that you have a lot of other things that you do far better that you should be focused on. To have this assistant actually have the gumption to say this to me, and she is actually a dear friend, somebody that I completely trust and respect. She became one of my early mentors, and I gave her full permission to be able to look at my behavior and critique me. So you build your board of directors one by one, picking people out. Some were situational mentors, some were, people that you have continuity with. I have an ex-CEO who was a client, who became a good friend, who is a mentor, who remains, a mentor and sponsor. So you build them piece by piece. Some of them continue for the long run. Some of them sort of come and go. So when Nancy and I talked, this was the person that was the assistant. She was my assistant at Merrill, my early assistant. And I always say to her that you taught me more about being a leader than any other person, because she taught me. What she did was she chipped away at all the pieces that I didn't need to do, that I didn't know I didn't need to do. So that is so important. So these board of directors can be people, superior, peers, and subordinates. Their rank and title doesn't matter. What they teach you and what you learn from them is what is important. Does that sort of answer? And I think there was a question about accountability partners. Well, I think that, again, I haven't had a formal accountability partner. At Merrill, when I was there, I developed these close friendships with 3 other women, 2 of whom still remain my very, very close friends. We were all mid-career women at that point in time. We had achieved a certain amount of success, but we had not been known widely across the organization. And we met at a women's event. We decided to form a group of 4. One was from trading and sales, another one from investment banking, the third one from the commercial bank, and I was from wealth management. We met, once a month. We met for a 2-hour lunch, and each of us had half hour to brief the others on what we were doing, both successes and failures and challenges. And what we did at the end of it was we walked away with a good sense for what the other 3 were doing. And, you always talk about how women are not good about bragging about their successes and so on. We each made it our business to brag about the other 3. Mm-hmm. And I realized that women are so generous and gracious and amazing at being able to speak about other people than they are about themselves. And what that did was it elevated all of us. So I would say to you, you can have a pure board of directors. They each held me accountable. I held them accountable. And I maintained very close friendships with 2 of them to this day. And it's been 20 years. So I think that you realize that they come from all different directions, from, unexpected places. You just have to be open enough and have a radar to allow that to come in.
Fabulous. Thank you, Subha. Katie did have to jump, but she said that she loved that around the accountability partners. So thank you. Thank you for that answer. We've got about 3 minutes. Anyone, I know a couple of people are having to start jumping off for meetings on the hour. Any final questions for Subha? Any comments for anyone on the line that you'd like to, feel free to come off, and you can come onto the audio line with us if you'd like. You can come with mute.
I'd like to ask one last one if nobody else is asking a question. You mentioned about getting the scholarship and your parents not wanting you to go to uni, and you just went anyway. I mean, was that a major trauma in your family, or did they just accept that you were now doing what you had to do, sort of thing?
Traumatic. If there was one trauma even worse than that, it was when I married a white man, and then that was like sacrilege. Is like, how do you ever do that? But I think that deep down my parents were proud in one way, and they were enormously worried and concerned. It had never been done before. Till my grandmother's generation, girls were married so early that they actually lived in their parents' home till they hit puberty and were then sent to their husband's home when they hit puberty. In my mother's generation, they were at home till they hit puberty and then they got married. So it depended on when you hit puberty is when you got married. Okay, so, and my mother was the first girl in her extended family to be allowed to actually go to university and get a degree. And that was because my father had wanted a wife that had a degree. That's why she got the degree. And I was the first girl in my extended family to be able to go away to university. No girl had ever left her parents' home.
It's
to go away
amazing.
other than.
Leave.
So you realize how generations of women had been held back. You know, I always used to say, you know, my grandmother is one of the smartest women I know, had a, you know, 6th grade education. And because she hit puberty, no, 8th grade education. She hit puberty at 8th grade and got married. And so when you really think about that, you say to yourself, generations of women who have been held down, oppressed, you know, in many ways, I feel like I stand for them. I speak for them. I do for them. And I feel this enormous, obligation and a debt of gratitude to pay forward. And, you know, grateful that I'm able to do it.
Thank you. Great story or stories. Oh.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Subha. I think there are so many interesting takeaways for myself and Jackie and everyone on the line, and everyone that's going to be listening to the recording. I think to hear about coming from that childhood and breaking those boundaries and the expectations. I think something that's really sitting with me is just that really strong belief that you've always had in who you were, what you were doing, and your own abilities, that you kind of did, you haven't wavered even when your family was saying no, when people were saying horrible things, when, you know, you've had other challenges in your career and health challenges, you know, you've always stuck true to who you are. I think that's an incredibly powerful lesson for us all. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. I am so grateful to have the opportunity to spend this time with you. And I hope that, you know, you hope that from your stories, other people take heart to say, you know, I can learn from this to move on and use this in my life. And I hope that's what this, this segment does for people that will listen to the recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.